Man, this gospel lesson was kind of cooking there at the beginning. We were thinking, yes, dishonest wealth. We get to keep all of our stuff. We get to play the world's game and win. And had we just not had that last verse at the end of the gospel, we might have heard everything we had wanted Jesus to say to us for all of these years. And yet, Jesus takes and turns this story at the very end. I would like to know how many of you were reading along with that gospel lesson and thought, what is Jesus talking about? Because it's really not the kind of story that we expect from him. It's this weird story that happens in Luke. And as you're going through, you're like, what really is he meaning here? And what point is he trying to make? I asked the same question when I was preparing for today and thought that we might wrestle a little bit with what Jesus is really saying. First off, Jesus sets forth this story about a manager who apparently hasn't been doing a very good job because he's about to lose his job. And so in order to kind of curry favor with the people that he works with, he starts to forgive some debts for no apparent reason, which then of course makes the people who are the debtors like him so that when he loses his job, they will do him favors in the future. Seems smart. But then of course the manager's boss hears that he's done this shrewd business and then commends him. And then just when you think, aha, Jesus is going to say they're both really bad, Jesus says, what about this is good? That this shrewd manager has actually done good work. Jesus is commending something here. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to decide what actually is being commended in this parable. Because we do get the end verse, which we'll get to. And so we know that Jesus is probably trying to make a point, but it does seem a bit opaque. Jesus says here in the story that the manager does something good. And then Jesus says, how much more should the children of light, those are the followers of Jesus, do what the manager did? So how much more should the children of light strive to be wise and shrewd in this world? That kind of idea is something I think we can turn for a minute because we are actually pretty good at living in the world. I think most of us at some point have had some pretty clear success. We have achieved at a high level. We have made it, so to speak. And even if we've gone up and down, we certainly know that we've got a lot of innate ability and capacity in us. The world has validated how we are able to live in the world. That's some good stuff. And yet, we know that success and achievement by the world standards is not all there is. But how seductive that success and achievement can be. How tempting it can be when we are good at what the world says we should be good at, when we can achieve and succeed and earn and collect, and how easy it would be for us, kind of innocently, and without any intention, to spend years seeking after that success and that achievement, and then guiding ourselves, our character, our souls, to believe that is all that we are meant to be. That the way the world measures success is really the ultimate good. But Jesus says, you can be shrewd in the world, and perhaps you should be shrewd in the world, but that is not all there is. That being shrewd in the world, being good at what the world sets forth as the game, that simply provides you a tool for doing what Jesus asks us to do, what is the most good. Following Jesus, actually investing ourselves and committing ourselves as disciples of Jesus, as becoming the children of light, that is our ultimate good. That is what we are made for. That's what God made us to do. And so for those who never lose sight, then perhaps being good at the world's game provides you the kind of fuel to help make the world a better place as children of light. Jesus says right at the very end, no one can serve two masters. You cannot serve God and wealth. And so when I take this whole story at once, I think what Jesus is really trying to point to is that wealth by itself, wealth is not the problem. It's when wealth becomes the most important thing to us. When wealth is what defines who we are, that is when wealth is a problem. But taking wealth as a tool to help you commit yourself to God, now that could actually work pretty well. And so if we take that idea, then the question is, how do we use the tools that we are good at in the world to actually do what God says is most important right now in this place and in this time? Getting to that point reminded me of one of my favorite scenes in one of my favorite movies. And I realized as I was starting to make a note about this movie that it's probably pretty old. And so when I went back and looked at when it came out, it was 1995. That's 30 years ago. So I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that there's a quarter of the people in this room that has probably never heard of this movie. Apollo 13, remember this one? Love this movie, it's so good. So if those of you are in here under 40 and you've never seen Apollo 13, then just write it down on your list. It's a good one, you will enjoy it. Let me tell you the story of Apollo 13. Pull yourself up to grandpa around the fireplace and let me explain. So Apollo 13, this is a couple trips after the first moon landing, and there are 3 men who take off and they expect to land on the moon, but trouble ensues. Remember, Houston, we have a problem? That's where this comes from. And so Apollo 13 finds 3 astronauts up in space, and they've had a catastrophic failure of their ship. And they've had to move into the smaller capsule that was supposed to be landing on the moon, except that capsule was not meant to sustain 3 people for many, many days in space. And so they come to a problem where they are running out of oxygen. And it's because the carbon dioxide filters are not able to filter everything that they are expelling in that tiny little capsule. And so the people on the ground have to try and figure out how to keep these men alive so that they can get back to Earth. And in this scene, when they realize that they've got to use other filters, one of the men downstairs on the ground at Mission Control says, well, can't we use the filters from the other part of the ship? And they say, no, because those filters are square cartridges, and the filters on the other part of the ship are round. So they literally have to figure out how to put a square peg in a round hole in order to save these men's lives. And so here comes the good part. That's all preamble. Here comes the good part. So the engineers walk into a room, and they dump buckets of junk onto a table. And one of the guys says, okay, we need to get this, and he holds up the square piece, to fit into the hole made for this, and he holds up the round piece, using only that. And he points to the junk on the table because, of course, they only have what they have in the ship. And so in this moment, we have people realize that they've got to do something really important. Their purpose is to save the lives of those 3 astronauts. And yet the task in front of them is to use the tools they have been given. And that is really what Jesus is getting at in today's gospel. We show up here today because we're looking to be guided. We want Jesus to help us. We want him to show us the way. And what Jesus offers us today in this parable is kind of like the engineer dumping all the junk out on the table. We have only what we have. We have the skills and the gifts that God has given us. And we have the skills and the gifts that God has given us to use in this time and in this place. That's all we get. So don't worry about what has happened in the past or what might happen in the future. You've got a bunch of junk on the table, and you can use those tools, but you should only use those tools to help you achieve the greater purpose. That is where church comes into play, reminding us of greater purpose. Because I'll tell you, when you're in the moment and you're trying to solve the problems and you're feeling the pressure of performance and success and achievement, it can become all-consuming. And yet when we come together just an hour a week right here, we get to remember what we've forgotten in the rush of the week, and that is the greater purpose. We are children of light. Jesus has called us to work to make the world a better place, little by little, person by person, tool by tool. Our purpose is what we have to keep in front of us, even with all the busy work that we do day to day. And the good news is that we as a church, we know how this works. 5 years ago, we leased a portion of our land in order to do some major development, but we knew that the development and the money it would make was not the purpose. The purpose was using that money to help change lives in the world, and so we committed most of that to go and do that and to help us do more here. And then 2 years ago, we raised money in our own community in order to change our building, and that building is going to be great, but that building is not the purpose. That building is a tool. The purpose is to bring more and more people to faith in Christ in order to have their lives changed, to go out in the world and to change the world for the good. And now, this fall, we have been talking about discipleship. Discipleship is what we are about. Changing our hearts and minds and our souls as followers of Jesus, that is our great purpose in this place. And so in these next few weeks, you're going to be asked to commit and invest yourself next year in what we do together toward that great purpose. One commitment is what we are very good at doing already, and that is giving our money. We are asking you to give so that the wealth that we often chase does not define us. And that the wealth that we are pretty good at achieving can be used as a tool together in this place to help make the world better. But we will not stop there this year. We're asking you for a second commitment, and that is how you will use your gifts to serve others in the world. And it is that service that will help change us from the inside out, because yes, giving money is good. It sets our priority. But giving money and giving our time out in the world to help those in need, that together helps transform us in very powerful ways. Each of us is called to take what we have been given, to use the tools at our disposal, to do the work of today, never forgetting that our greatest purpose is to bring the light into the world. Jesus has called us. Jesus has called us to use what we have to make the world a better place, to bring heaven to earth now. And we can love each other enough here to hold ourselves accountable to do the very best with the tools that we have been given to make the best impact possible. And when we do that is when Christ's light shines. Amen.